My husband's first crush was pregnant, and she came to my house begging my husband to take her in. I didn't agree, and that night she jumped off a flyover and died twice. Later, my husband promised me to go bungee jumping. The moment he pushed me down, he whispered in my ear, "If you hadn't driven Annie away, she wouldn't have wanted to die, and you owe her this life." He took out scissors to cut the rope, and I fell to my death from a height. Open your eyes again, I rejoined his first crush belly to my house to beg for stay that day. I smiled and said, "This is just a coincidence, I'm pregnant too, let's raise the baby together." A series of knocks came from outside the door. I woke up from my sleep. The nightmare I just had sent chills down my spine. I dreamt that David took me bungee jumping, and the moment he pushed me down, he pulled out a pair of scissors. He said to me with a hateful look on his face, "Sophia, if you hadn't been cruel enough to drive Annie away in the first place, she wouldn't have tried to find her death. You owe her this life. Go to hell." David cut the rope with scissors, and I fell to my death from a great height. There was a steady knock at the door and a familiar voice. "David, are you home?" I snapped back. It was Annie's voice. Annie was David's college crush, and in my previous life, David and I had been married for half a year when Annie came to the door. She said she was pregnant, and the father of the baby didn't want to recognize the child, let alone marry her. But she wanted to give birth to the child and begged David to take her in. I was pregnant at the time, and naturally I didn't want to let David's first crush in. So I politely turned her down. Annie left in despair, and David and I had a cold war for a day. Although he didn't say anything, his actions were already telling me that he blamed me for not taking Annie in. That night, David received a call from Annie. Annie said to him on the phone, "Oh, David, even you want to leave me behind? I don't have any more attachment in this world. I am now on the flyover. Let's meet again in the next life." "Annie, don't think about it. Wait for me to come over." David was eating dinner. He immediately put down his chopsticks, grabbed his car keys, and headed out. I watched as David anxiously left the house and drove to the flyover that Annie said. My heart went a little bit cold. David came back at dawn the next day. He sat disheveled in the living room and smoked. I came out of my room and asked him, "How's she, Annie?" "She's dead, one body." David's eyes were red with remorse and regret. "Sophia, you shouldn't have turned her down. We don't lack a room for her in our house. Why were you so cruel?" I asked back, "David, you think it's my fault? There are plenty of rooms in hotels. Why did you have to stay at our house?" He didn't say anything and buried his head and smoked a cigarette. From there we started a cold war for a while, and as the baby in my belly got bigger, he started to reflect on himself. He realized it wasn't my fault. He bought me a trunk full of flowers to apologize. He took my hand and said, "Sophia, it's my fault. It's Annie who can't think for herself. I shouldn't blame you." I put up with it for the sake of the baby in my belly. From then on, he didn't mention that incident. He made me sandwiches and fried eggs every day, but the baby in my belly was still miscarried. I was devastated. He comforted me. "Sophia, don't be sad. We will have a child in the future. Let me take you to bungee jumping. I heard that the moment you jump from the sky, all your worries are gone." I went bungee jumping with him because I wanted to get rid of the boredom in my heart. But he gave me a fatal blow. It turned out that he had never let go of Annie. He had always resented me. He resented me to the point of pushing me down from the heights. Before he pushed me down, he cruelly told me, "Do you know why the baby in your belly can't be kept? Because I added something to the soup I made for you." I shivered with anger when I thought of these past events. He was so cruel to mutilate his own child for Annie. I got out of bed and pulled back the curtains to look out the window. I was reborn. Reborn to the day Annie came to the door with a big belly and begged to be taken in. David left for work early this morning and wasn't home. I took out the pregnancy test from the drawer, and now I am also 2 months pregnant. What a coincidence. If I was born again before I married him, how good would it be? I would not hesitate to withdraw from the marriage. This child came at the wrong time. Annie shouted outside the door, "David, are you there? Sophia, are you at home? Open the door." I put the pregnancy test away and slowly went to the restroom to wash up. I heard Annie pick up her cell phone and call David. "Oh, David, are you busy? I'm at your door and Sophia won't open the door for me." "What happened? Don't you cry yet." David called back to her on the phone. Wait for me, I'll be right back now. Annie waited outside the door for a good 20 minutes. I opened the door and looked at her. Something wrong. Annie had a suitcase at her feet. She rubbed her stomach and said to me, Sophia, I'm pregnant. The baby's father doesn't want the baby, and I don't have a place to stay right now. Can you and David take me in? I didn't know Annie very well. She came when we got married. I didn't know then that she was David's college crush. I wouldn't have married her if I had known David had a nostalgic first crush. David was on his way back. I pulled Annie inside and said with a smile, what a coincidence, I'm pregnant too, let's raise the baby together. Annie looked at my stomach and followed up with, how many months are you? Does David know? More than 2 months. He doesn't know yet. I'm not going to tell him for now. I had just finished speaking when footsteps sounded outside the door. David was back and he saw Annie and I sitting on the couch, first with a start, then with a sigh of relief. He went to get Annie some water and inquired, Annie, what brings you here? Is something wrong? I'm pregnant and I'm in a desperate situation, so I wanted to come to your house to borrow a place for a while. Annie finished with a glance at me and added, Sister Sophia has already agreed. David was a bit surprised. He pulled me into the study, closed the door, and asked me, Sophia, did you really agree to take Annie in? I said graciously, yes, she is in a desperate situation. If I don't take her in, what if she can't think of a way to die? Anyway, there are 3 rooms in the house, so it's not bad for her to have that room. Sophia, you are so generous. David's brow hangs with joy as he wraps his arms around my waist and prepares to kiss me. I felt disgusted and didn't move to push him away. He smirked, you're right, there's plenty of room in the house, so let her stay for a while. David walks into the living room and shushes Annie. Annie says she hasn't had breakfast yet. David immediately put on his apron and went to the kitchen to make Annie breakfast and said he was going to the grocery store later to buy ingredients to make her dinner himself. He also asked Annie what she liked to eat. Annie said shyly, you know I like cake. If it's sweet strawberry cake or chocolate cake, that would be great. David responded with bravado, okay, I'll buy them all for you later. I couldn't help but roll my eyes from my room. David packed out the second bedroom for Annie. He came over and greeted me, Sophia, I'm taking Annie to the grocery store, are you going? I blandly said, I'm not going, you guys go. David nodded, well then you clean up the house and I'll get you your favorite oranges back. Go on. I watched coldly as David and Annie left. After they left, I simply packed some bags and dialed a long-lost phone number. James, are you free now? Can we meet up? James responded without hesitation. Sure, where are you? I'll pick you up. No, I'll just drive myself over, I'll meet you at the coffee shop. James was in a happy mood and said, okay. I drove to the coffee shop to meet James. James is my college classmate who was the shining prince of our school. He used to chase after me, and after hearing the news of my marriage, he who never went to bars got drunk that night at the bar. We haven't spoken since the wedding, but I know from a mutual friend that he started his own business in the city and is currently single and unmarried. The coffee shop. James was already waiting for me. It's been a long time, and he's a little more mature than he used to be. He has curly blonde hair, and as he sits in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, the sunlight falls on his eyelashes and draws a lot of stares. After exchanging pleasantries, I said to him, James, there's something I'd like to ask you. Sophia, if you need anything, just ask. I spoke up, my husband and I had a fight, and I'd like you to come and stay at the house for a while, is that okay? If it hadn't happened in my previous life, I definitely wouldn't have opened my mouth and told my male friend that I wanted to stay at his house. But now I'm in a different frame of mind. David doesn't think it's okay for Annie to come and stay at our house. Then, I'd like to see how David would feel if I went to stay at the house of a male friend who had once courted me. James froze and then nodded his head. Sure, you can stay as long as you want. Just like that, I moved into James' house. After David and Annie finished shopping at the supermarket, they took her to the mall and bought her many sets of maternity clothes as well as daily necessities. They came home with big bags. David washed Annie's cherries and strawberries, set the cake with hot cocoa on the table, and brought it to her for her to eat. He then went into the master bedroom and told me to go out for some fruit. The master bedroom was emptied. David saw that the suitcase in the corner was gone and then opened the closet to see that the outfits I wore most often were also gone. He immediately called my phone. When I got his call, I was eating the fruit that James had cut for me. David asked, "Sophia, where are you? Why is your suitcase missing?" I blandly said, "It's a bit crowded at home. I moved in with James." David knew James and knew that he used to chase me. He'd always thought of James as a love interest. David exploded when he heard that and said angrily, "What are you doing moving to James' house? Don't you know the difference between men and women? Hurry up and come back here."